welcome to the Secrets of Happily Ever After. I'm your host, Monica Tanner, and I'm super excited to introduce you to my friend, Jill Freestone. As a life coach, Jill focuses on helping teens and adults handle anxiety and big emotions in their relationships. Jill has additional training in anxiety, emotions, relationships, mindfulness, meditation, trauma, somatic processing, and much more. She loves her work, but her happy place is the outdoors. She's an avid hiker, biker, and outdoor adventurer. She's the mother of 3 amazing daughters and wife to an incredibly smart and handsome husband, whom she adores, especially because he was willing to write this bio. And I added a little bit from your accomplishments that she is known for her ability to hold space for kids, teens, and adults, all different age groups and their big emotions, helping them use these big emotions to connect instead of tear families apart. She's compassionate and creates safe spaces for her clients to be vulnerable and willing to try somatic regulation practices. She's helped many families reconnect their struggling relationships and gain greater confidence in communication and working with their big emotions. Welcome, Jill. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you, Monica. I'm excited to be with you as well.
Okay. Well, I think we should just jump right into the big emotions because I don't think anyone's going to have a problem understanding. Like, I think at this point, everybody's like, yes, we have some big emotions, right? So maybe define and list off some of those big emotions that come up for a lot of people.
Yeah, the two main emotions people come to me for are anxiety and anger. And those are the most common, but there's different like levels of anxiety. Is it stress? Is it like an anxiety disorder? Is it fear? And then with anger, there's so much that can be wrapped up in anger, like sadness or shame or guilt, and like being hurt or the disgust. So like those are kind of those main core emotions. But joy and excitement is interesting as well because that fuels some maladaptive behaviors as well. And it can be something we're seeking and avoiding others.
Oh, explain that just a little bit more.
So we think that we want joy and excitement, and we think it's good where the physical sensations of anxiety and stress can feel very similar to excitement. And so if we can kind of neutralize that the physical sensations are similar, that the sensations aren't bad,
Mhm.
that they're very similar, but we've labeled excitement as good and fear as bad.
Oh, interesting.
And then where joy, we think, oh, we're seeking excitement, we're seeking joy. And so we can start doing behaviors that help us feel that, but they're not healthy for us because we're thinking that we need to feel this buzz of excitement, like any unhealthy behavior that even something positive that isn't unhealthy, like reading a book, for example, but we're seeking excitement, we're joy and relaxation, but we're doing it thinking that we need to feel this more often or avoiding other things that are healthy.
I see. So almost like numbing or
Yeah, a numbing behavior. Yeah. Yeah. Or even just believing that um, I should be happier more than I am.
yeah, yeah, totally. So how can we start to change our relationship with the emotions themselves?
Um, so people like usually come to me thinking that the emotion is the problem. They're
Mhm.
like, here, I've got this problem with anger. Anger is so bad. I don't want to feel angry anymore, or anxiety is ruining my life. But I help them to see that it's their relationship with the emotion that is actually the problem. And so we want to transform that relationship and help them to view the emotion as a superpower and a strength instead of this weakness that they're feeling the shame and the guilt about. And so we look at their history with each emotion and we go through the resistance and the shame and the beliefs they have so that they can move from resistance to tolerance to allowing to acceptance, to embracing and really looking at that. So the first thing that's important is to differentiate between the physical sensations that you feel in your body and then the thoughts that you have either before or after the sensations, and then the actions you take while you're feeling it or because you felt it.
Mm.
Because a lot of people think all those things I just listed are the emotion, but they're not. The physical sensation is the emotion. And then there's angry thoughts or anxious actions or angry actions. or angry thoughts. And so that helps us to neutralize the physical sensations as neither good or bad, just a messenger. It's information.
Yeah.
And so these physical sensations are information. And really, like, that takes a lot of work for people to really believe that it's not good or bad, because people usually call them positive or negative emotions. And so that's what we do from the beginning, is they're not positive or negative. We don't even use that terminology. And using this, oh, is this a comfortable one or an uncomfortable one? Is it kind of tight or pressing, or is it expanding or constricting? What information is coming here?
Mm.
And so that when the information shows up, there's this curiosity and this compassion towards the emotion itself
Mhm.
and your reactions to it. And like, oh yeah, I don't like this one. I'm still in the phase of resistance to this one. Oh yeah, oh, I don't like how this feels. Oh, I want to do this. I shouldn't. Oh, I'm still in resistance to this and myself and my actions. And so we work through all that and help them create a new story around that, and help them to notice after it happened, and then during, and then before. It's this process of gradually coming to more awareness and to be an observer, instead of just letting the emotion drive.
Yeah, no, I feel like what you're saying is that the emotions themselves are very neutral. It's the thoughts and the story that we create around the emotion that give us the results that we really don't want. And so I love that curiosity, especially because when I talk to couples about, their behaviors or whatever, it's a much more open stance when you can just get curious. And so it sounds like doing this with your own emotions would help you create that relationship with yourself where you could just allow yourself to be curious, like, oh, this is just information. Let me get curious about it instead of just attacking it or resisting it or all of those things that you were talking about.
Yeah, and the importance to be able to have a strong connected relationship with a spouse or a child is having that relationship with yourself and your own emotions, your own body, and understanding yourself. Because then if you don't have that, then you're judging the other person's physical reactions, and you're judging their actions and responses and what they should or shouldn't do, or you're seeing them in anger and you're thinking anger is bad because you think your own anger is bad. And so it creates, again, that disconnect, that it's like, also, like, all of them are neutral, but then we say, but this one feels bad.
Yeah.
And so if you're still saying because it feels bad, it's bad, I'm like, well, what about when you're riding the roller coaster and you feel like throwing up and your heart is pounding and you feel tense, and it, like, that actually isn't pleasant. If you were to really just pause and like take yourself out of the roller coaster, and like what your body is feeling is constriction and tight and sweaty and all of that. But you've decided this is fun in this
I
setting.
love it. Yeah. That's funny.
But in another setting, you've decided it's scary. You're
Mm.
about to give a speech or perform or something. And so it's being able to neutralize your thoughts around the actual sensations too, and say, oh yeah, this is uncomfortable, but I'm choosing to feel this right now,
Mhm.
to allow it to be here for the information it's giving me, or for the benefit of moving through an emotion. Because sometimes moving through the emotion is where the information comes, not just what it's sending out. It's a process of transformation or change.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like you have to be curious to be open to the information that it's
It's
giving.
essential.
And I love how you said if you can be curious with your own emotions, then you can also be open to being curious about your partner or your kids or the people around you. Oh,
Yeah,
so
that's
key.
why when parents bring me their teens, or they come and say, like, my husband is this, that, like, we always pause and go inward first. And I'm like, well, yeah, your teen could use some help, but that's why we also coach the parents as well, because
Yeah.
often they're mirroring back and forth with each other unmet needs and skills that neither have.
Totally. So, how can big emotions most often create the disconnect in our closest relationships?
Yeah. So we've talked just a little bit about this, of how that can start happening. But I think one thing that's important is emotional safety is required for connection and for
Mm.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so you have to be vulnerable to connect, and you have to have emotional safety to be willing to be vulnerable. And we often miss this emotional safety piece because, I mean, we, like, when we were children, it was not talked about. Emotional intelligence didn't exist, and we were just told, "Don't cry, don't yell, go to your room." Like, we were taught that any expression of our emotion was bad and to, banished to be alone, but not told what to do. And so it was just like emotions are bad. And that's thankfully changing. But we have to create this safety. And that's been one of the biggest goals in our home. And it has happened is a beautiful thing that it is safe to feel and express and show any emotion in our home. There are certain actions that are not okay, that you separate yourself when you need to do that. But it's also safe to ask any topic and any question and to get upset about it. But then there's, like I said, there's those boundaries and rules on the expression. So we're not going to have emotional safety if we're afraid of the other person's emotions, like their outbursts, or if they've hurt us in the past. And if it's just not allowed to express a big emotion or to even feel one, you're not going to have connection. That's going to create a disconnect. So if like you're not allowed to talk about emotions. And I have an example from a client that said I can share this. There's a dad in the family who has high anxiety and therefore high anger. Usually those can pair together, but not always. Other people suppress and they have perfectionism and people pleasing. But the dads became explosive, and they're, as a family, I'm coaching the whole family. They're 4 teens and the parents all together, and they're traveling through Europe. So they have this situation where the dad gets a work call or another important call. He takes it while they're driving through like busy, crazy places that are hard to drive.
Yeah,
And he
stressful.
takes this call and he's like trying to shush everyone. He's feeling anxiety about the call, about the traffic, about where they're getting to. And he's going to explode in anger. Mom's anxious that dad's going to explode in anger. So her anxiety is high. She's worried about him. The kids are trying to be quiet, but they're also normal teenagers with their own skills and their own levels of abilities. And so there's this resistance to wanting to even get in a car. There's this disconnect that they don't want to be together. They're afraid of the explosion and they're mad at each other. There's the resentment that's building. They're thinking negative thoughts about each other and they're not understanding each other or empathizing with each other. They're only seeing it from their side because this emotion and this explosion is becoming this disconnecting problem in their family. And so it was fascinating as I was able to hear the different teens or the parents each share their different sides of the view of this issue. And they all like, well, this is the problem. Well, this is the problem. And when we're caught up in that big emotion, it's hard to see anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we sit and look at it, what are all the solutions, and to be able to help them to see what they're each bringing to it and to have compassion for each other, they were able to come up with a solution. Like, what am I going to do individually when I'm feeling this? What are you going to do individually? How are we going to see this? And how can we have compassion for each other? It completely shifted, that, and it brought their family together as they could openly talk about it.
So the next question is, what can we do about the disconnection? So is that what you're saying is learn the skills to be able to communicate?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll lead into that a little bit more, is that's it, is the family they didn't know even that was what the problem was. They were just disconnected and mad at each other, right? And they didn't realize that it was the lack of the ability to regulate and manage your own. Like the dad didn't know how to manage his own emotions and was just letting it be in charge. And the kids weren't either, and the mom wasn't either. And there's just this tension, this underlying tension going on. And so they were just disconnected and not happy and not wanting to be together and not enjoying this great trip.
Yeah.
And so that's where that when you say, where does it come from? It's just like this emotion is just creating that. And so a couple other examples before I go into the solution of how can emotions cause disconnect is that if we're caught up in our kids' big emotion, then it's really hard to connect with your spouse. To be like, it's really hard. Like if that's the main topic of all your conversations and it's like all consuming, if you have this kid with big emotions, it's hard to be fully present for a conversation or for intimacy. Like it's hard to pause, your thoughts. It's hard to have a separate connection with them or to parent from a clean state. Like, you're just, it becomes,
I get that completely.
it's like all consuming, and it can reduce your connection when you start to feel like overly connected to fixing your kid's problem. And you're really attached to helping them instead of actually being curious and seeing them and validating them too. And so then that disconnects your relationship with your child, where they feel like mom just wants to fix me. She doesn't even like me. A lot of the teens or the kids come to me like, mom just wants me to stop this anger or this anxiety problem. If I didn't have this, they would love me, they would accept me. And so it really creates disconnects. And when we don't know how to support them right in the middle of the blow up, which is what a lot of people come to me, then parents can start arguing about it in front of the kids. Or how do
Mm.
we parent? Or then one parent is managing it differently, and then there's that disconnect. So there's resentment and anger, and that adds to more blames, right? Because it's like, you're not helping me with this child, or you're helping too much and in the wrong way. And so
Yeah.
then there's your own emotions when you're overreacting, and you start to like the shame and the blame of like, something's wrong with me. And so then you're feeling all that, and then you lay down to try and be intimate, and all those thoughts and feelings come up again of like, I can't have fun, I can't be fully present, like our life is out of control every single day, we've got these blowups going on.
It does feel chaotic. Yeah. I mean, it does feel big emotions create a lot of chaos.
Completely. And it's hard to like set that aside and to just be vulnerable and connect. And then there's the other side where people are suppressing, which is what I did like the first 10 years of our marriage, where I'm suppressing it. And so I'm interacting with kind of a false version of myself with my husband.
Mm.
And there's this lack of disconnect because I'm not completely being open. And I'm, I'm harboring resentment, and I'm not communicating because I don't know how to communicate about these emotions, because I think it's wrong to be angry. I think it's wrong to be mad at your husband or to argue. So I'm just trying to be good.
And
So
that's
then
like
there's,
the biggest thing you learned, right? Because
yeah,
it's like not wrong to be angry. It's just your
yeah,
thoughts about it that was making you
totally.
crazy.
Yeah. So then there's that underlying anxiety, being on edge, and then you end up exploding. And so we like walking on eggshells. A lot of families are doing that because they don't know how to communicate about the emotions. And then we get punished for the emotions. Like,
Mm.
why would we want to be close or vulnerable with someone who shames us for our big emotion, or who's always trying to fix us or embarrass us? So yeah, back to your question is of like, how can we, what can we do about this? Like
Yeah.
that, but like there's a lot of reasons of how it creates disconnect. And I think a lot of times we just, again, we think, oh, well, it's just the anger that's the problem. There's so many layers. After coaching on this topic for 5 years, like so many examples have come and helped me to understand it, even deeper. But again, to answer that question, the secret is to view big emotions as one of your biggest opportunities to connect with your spouse or your kids. And that just seems bizarre after I just spent this long time
Yeah.
saying that it disconnects us.
Uh-huh.
But if you just flip that around and say, this moment that they're in this big emotion is my opportunity right now. Because usually it's what disconnects us because of how I view it and how I respond.
Yeah.
But if I say, oh, here it is.
Yeah. You see it as, okay, I want you to flesh this out because
Yeah, I'm in, like I'm in, it's game time. Like
yeah.
literally that's how you want to respond and say, so then in that moment, you're going to like, you saw my face, like, okay, this is my time to jump in and shine, because you've done the work on your own emotions and you've done the work to regulate yourself throughout the day. Or you might even say, hold on, I am totally dysregulated. This, and this just happened. I'm in my own ready to punch zone. We're both going to separate and come back. Like you're able to take a check of your body and see where you're at and know if you can jump in right then and make it a moment of connection. That's the one thing, is to assess where you're at physically, like your own regulation in your body, your mental state. Or if you're like, I'm not, can I get here? Can I use my tools, my regulation tools, and regulate my body? Can I get softened? Can I get into curiosity and compassion so I can connect with my kid? So that's essential. But anyway, you're going to be able to pause and lean in with that curiosity instead of reacting with fear or irritation that it's happening, or trying to fix and suppress. Because like that's often what we try to do because we're dreading. So see them in a vulnerable moment. Think of respect and love instead of harshness, and thinking we don't need to fear or eliminate this big emotion, because the emotion is never the problem. Like it's just a feeling to allow. Like, oh, they're having a feeling. Let's let them move through this feeling. And so this is like, okay, this is my opportunity to model emotional intelligence. This is the moment where they're going to learn how I regulate myself, how I demonstrate this. And so I can make it safe for them if I've already been modeling this, if we've already talked about it, we've had calm conversations about when this big emotion happened, this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. Because in the moment, if you just try, trying these new skills, and be like, shut up, leave me alone, or like, don't want to ask about that. Because like a lot of life coaches were like, just ask your kids to name where it feels in your body. Like that's not going to work if you just start asking that in the
I'm
middle
like,
of
clearly they don't have teenagers.
yeah. Yeah. Or even a 7-year-old doesn't want to do that. Like, and so it's a matter of discussing and teaching these concepts when they're calm. And then it's you modeling that so that they see that it's normal for an adult to feel and to feel out of control, but to say what they're going to do. So for example, me, like I allow myself to cry in front of my kids or to be angry or to be sad, but I explain what's going on. And so saying like, I'm sad because of this. This is what I'm going to do right now. Like, come and will you brush my hair? Will you hold me while I'm sad and while I'm crying? And I have 3 adult daughters now, 19 to 24. And this switched back when they were like preteens, when we switched to this kind of emotional intelligence in the home. And they've learned over time how to respond to me and how to respond to each other and how to request the help. And so I'll say like I'm really angry. Can we turn on an angry song and dance together? Like, but that takes a lot of regulation to be able to say that out loud instead of spewing the anger outside. Or I'm going to go in my room. I'm going to drum. I'm going to play the piano. I'm going to go outside and go for a walk. Want to come with me? You want to be alone? Or, and like, it's that, do I want to self-regulate or will you co-regulate with me? And so we ask, would you like support in this moment? Do you want to be alone? And so just like a couple days ago, I had a daughter who was like, she's just like, oh yeah, it's my period, or I'm so mad at everyone and everything. And she'll just say that and you can see it and her whole body is radiating it, but she's holding back the angry thoughts she's having about everyone and everything. She just states, I'm mad at everyone and everything. And she goes outside. And I see her process. I see her go play guitar or something. And, let's turn on this playlist. So it's this modeling, communicating about what you're feeling and deciding how to regulate. And they will learn and they will then start to do that. But it's not like, oh, I'm going to start using this tool on you and you have to do this.
Yeah.
Like it's a completely separate behavior.
Well, I want to show off your brilliance a little bit and like get a little bit of coaching because I know you probably, because I'm thinking about my listeners and I'm like, probably a lot of them are in a similar situation as me. Like we've got a bunch of teenagers at our house and a lot of big emotions happening all the time. I mean, we just the period of time we're in, we just started school. So, I feel like people are just getting used to routines and they're not getting enough sleep. I always say that. I'm like, nobody in this house is getting enough sleep, right? And then we're going into holiday season where, we're making holiday plans and, in comes, all of the family drama and all of that. And so I feel like right now, the thing is there's a lot of big emotions in my household. Like kids come in and they're grumpy after school or they're frustrated with this or that or whatever. But I keep kind of telling my husband, I'm like, you know what? I get such great reports of my kids outside of the home. Normally, like people are like, oh, your daughter's so great and she does this and that. And sometimes I'm like, really? Because at home, she kind of freaks out all the time, right? And I won't even tell you what, I have 2 daughters, so I won't tell you which one, but probably both of them, right? And it's like, so I want to create a safe space at home for her to have, because I feel like probably they go out and they're really well behaved with their teachers and the neighbors and, all the different responsibilities that they have. And then they come home and it's a safe place to have their big emotions. But sometimes I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
like we need to rein some of that in because you
Exactly.
can't treat your brother that way, or you can't treat me that way or whatever. And so what do we do? Like, how do we make sure that we're modeling the good things and teaching them the good things and separating the emotions from the behaviors and all of that?
Yeah. So one is you don't punish for feeling an emotion, but there would be a consequence for the behavior that might be taken, yelling at your brother, hitting your brother.
Yeah.
I don't believe in punishments, but if there would be a consequence for that.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, if we try to just like come from the top down and say, oh, she's having these issues, I believe in coming down from the bottom and the root and say, what are the unmet needs? Why is she exploding? What can we do to help her regulate her nervous system so that we're not just trying to stop these behaviors? And so down at the bottom, we see someone who's been trying all day long to do what she needs to do, to sit still all day, to listen, to focus. Like if I had to go do high school right now, I would be completely exhausted.
Right.
Especially like every morning they're up, they're out, and you have to look good. The social pressure, like everything about it is intense. And so to just think about that from their perspective and think, what can we do with transitions and with any needs? So like understanding that kids aren't trying to be bad. Like I love Dr. Ross Green's in his book, The Explosive Child, where he says that behaviorally challenging kids are challenging because they're lacking skills to not be challenging. And most of the time, the skills that they're lacking are flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, and problem solving. So looking at that and saying, she doesn't have the skills to regulate her nervous system when she's re-entering a different transition here into the home. She feels safe, so she's just letting herself go, but she hasn't learned to notice, oh, my body's feeling overwhelmed and sensory, or whatever type of overwhelm she's feeling. What are her tools and strategies going to be? Is it that when she's coming home, we have no music or classical music or something soothing and calming, and we don't talk, how's your day, whatever. We don't do that. Or is it that she needs to vent and she needs to just be out and you just need to validate, validate, validate? Is it that when we come home, everyone has, food, silence, rest, or outdoor swinging? Some people need that motion, like literally problem solving from the bottom to find out what kind of transitions help people to regulate back down. And a lot of the teams that I'm helping them each hour at school, noticing their nervous system and helping themselves regulate with all those different breathing and somatic tools, that they're noticing that instead of just like the anxiety is building all day long just because they're dysregulated and their thoughts plus just their body. So then that, and then also as a parent, can you be aware when you see the dysregulation to know how to support that? And so there's a lot of complicated things there, but it's actually just, an open conversation where we talk through it, we experiment with some different things. And again, we validate the emotion when it's happening. It looks like you're feeling really stressed, really angry. And they might be like, no, I'm not. Like they might even respond that way.
Right.
Or don't tell me that. Then you say, would you like support? Like, and that's the question we should ask. Would you like my support right now? Would you like to be alone? And so we've talked ahead of time. What are the phrases? What are the ways that I say this that's annoying? What are the ways that I say this that gets you extra mad? What if I try
I
this?
think that's probably my problem. I think I say it in ways that drive them crazy.
Yeah, you have to keep asking and keep trying. And again, you talk about it around the table when everyone's laughing and happy and saying, what are the things that I say that are so annoying? And this is what we were able to do with
Oh,
that
I would
family.
get a laundry list.
Yeah. So I'm coaching the whole family and they're like, when dad does this with his face, or when he says this, then we know he's about to explode and we know he thinks we're idiots. And it was very aware, an awareness for the dad to say, oh, I didn't know that my body language was contributing to this. I didn't know that this phrase is very annoying to them. So it's all these parts together, but then in the moment, experimenting with that concept of, do they want co-regulation with you? Do they want to be alone? And can we validate multiple times what they're feeling, even if they're resisting it because you're teaching that? And then you say, okay, this behavior is not acceptable. And then you do whatever the consequence is. You set that up ahead of time. I won't be with you if you continue to scream. We will all move. You won't be able to have whatever that you're using right at this moment. And then
Okay, can I stop you right there? Because
Mhm.
I feel like you just touched on something that definitely happens in my household. I'm assuming it happens in other households. But like what will happen is my kids will come in from a long day of school and
Mhm.
I'll want to talk to them and be like, how'd it go? Like how was school or whatever. And immediately they go to some sort of a YouTube short or something on their phone. And I can tell that they're just numbing. Like it's been a
Yeah.
long day, a hard day. They're home and they're like, I just want to watch this.
Yeah.
And if you talk to me, I'm going to hate you. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I, from what I know that that's numbing. I know that that's probably not a super like productive, good behavior. But at the same time, I'm like, I give them some leeway because I know they've been out in the world and it's been stressful and frustrating. And so they
Yeah.
do need to just kind of zone out a little bit. But at the same time, I'm getting a little stressed because I'm like, I want them to talk to me and I don't want them to just shove their face in the phone. And like, what do I do?
Yeah. So think about it from your perspective. I mean, from their perspective.
Hmm.
If you had just been in, 8 hours of intense classes, and
Yeah.
then your husband was like, honey, let's connect.
Yeah.
Tell me all about it. Some people respond really well right in that moment and want to share immediately. And so you have to know your nervous system. How do you respond? What are your languages of reconnection? And so if for that child or for you, it's good. Like, so then my husband knows for me, it's really good if he's like, let's go for a walk. He knows how to read me because I need to talk.
Yeah.
Each of my kids are different. And for some of them, they will talk later if we're doing something.
Hmm.
But if I'm just asking the questions when they're in that overwhelm, it's pointless and it's creating disconnect.
So is it okay for them to use the phone to help them regulate the
It
overwhelm?
depends on how long and if they're using it for what purpose. Are they using it to avoid the feeling or to just as a regulation, a calming?
Yeah. How do we know?
So we have to talk to them about that, and we have to teach them to notice what their body's feeling. Because if they use it to truly numb, that means they're skipping the emotion.
Mm.
They're avoiding it and they're suppressing it and it's still in there.
Hmm.
So then we would ask them, when you watch that show after school, put it down and then check your body and see how it feels. It would be better if instead of doing that, that they pause and they let their body regulate without an electronic, but sometimes they're not at that skill level yet. And so they can use that and then afterwards check something. I mean, that's a practice of exploring. Like, what if you choose to go play basketball for 5 minutes? What if you choose to, because even listening to music for some people, like that's really, really helpful. And other people, they can't do it unless there's something visual. Like, and so like watching a YouTube video with something to see because they're so trained on that. So what I'm trying to say is that it's helping them see the difference between and connecting with what their body physical sensations are before and after and during.
Mm.
Know whether it's numbing or helping them regulate.
Gotcha.
And then saying, I do want to connect with you about your day. Should we do that while we're playing basketball together, while we're playing a game, while we cook together? When's your favorite time that you'd love to talk about school?
Yeah.
Because one of my daughters, no conversation until 11:45 p.m. And
Yeah.
that's when
Right.
she wanted to say everything. And oh, but that was her time. And I had to work around that and decide, will I accept her schedule and change mine because she wanted to connect then?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And yeah, I definitely have those, right? I have those who, they come in very late at night. My husband and I are in bed and same thing. I'm like, I want you to come in here and talk to me, but at the same time, I'm really, really tired. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that help answer? I mean, it's pretty complicated, but it's also
It
kind of simple if you just look at the regulation.
It does. No, it's super helpful because I think I should be regulating my own emotions and finding out why does it make me so stressed when my kids come in on a phone, right? So I should definitely get some curiosity going about my own emotions and fears around all of that, right? And then realize that it's probably fine and we should just learn and get curious about how they're using that screen time and if it's
Right.
okay.
Right. And like, what can you do before you're going to encounter them? So a lot of times parents are prepping and regulating themselves. So you're driving to pick them up, or they're about to come and you're dancing or you're listening to music or you're just sitting there breathing and you're getting into a really curious, compassionate state, thinking these things, and you're just like ready so that they can actually feel that energy from you. And they'll
Yeah.
be more receptive than if you're like, don't get on your phone. You're like this defense.
Exactly. Like put your phone down. Yes, yes. You're
Like,
right.
oh,
If I was prepped myself, then I wouldn't just be like, put your phone down. I'm trying to talk to you.
right. And you can't be like that 24/7. So then you notice like, oh, I'm reacting this way to them. How can I slow that down and pause myself? And you're just breathing really slowly, like I'm squeezing my fists. I'm letting them go as I'm trying to breathe. And I'm like, oh, can I watch that with you? They're
Yeah.
pulling up a short. I'm like, yeah, show it to me. Or like, no, I need to go outside. Yeah, watch that. I'll be outside for a minute. And, and you're regulating yourself and you come back in and you're like, that looks really funny. And so it's just an awareness again of the body.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I do think in our family, like we do have these moments where we have like the phone conversations where we're like, I'm worried about how much screen time. Like for me, I'm like, hey, I don't really like that people are walking around in the house like on their phones, right? I'm like, you should look up and acknowledge that there's other people around and say hello and be cordial and all of these things. And so we have been having these conversations, but I have noticed that when we have the conversations when it's not happening, it's a much more open conversation.
Yes.
We can learn more about it. So now you've given me the tools to ask some more questions about like maybe what's going on when it's not happening.
Yeah. And I think another one is teaching them to read their body signals, because as parents, we often teach them that they shouldn't heed their signals because we just tell them what to do and when, like, oh, you can't be hungry. You just had a snack. Or that's just a small scratch. It doesn't hurt. Or don't cry. It's not a big deal. It's only one shot. Don't worry. And like, it's that, well, no, you shouldn't, you don't need to use your phone right now. You should be doing this. And
Right.
then for a minute, like even that one you brought up, like they walk through the room, they don't talk to anyone. Let's just step back and say, what if they are actually trying to regulate themselves by holding in anger that they could spew if they open their mouth?
Right.
What if in that moment they're like, okay, just watch this screen, walk through the room calmly, get to there. I can do this without yelling at everyone. And
And
I'm
you
not
could
saying
be
that's
right, because if I interrupted them, they'd probably yell at their sister or something,
yeah, like
right? Yeah.
explode. And so like in that moment, you just step back and say, okay, how am I assuming I know more than they do about their own body needs?
Yeah.
And most of the time at a teenager, they're not that aware, but they can be. My kids learned later as teenagers of that awareness. um I mean, my college daughter came home and we were both cooking in the same kitchen. And there are times when we know it's better for us to have our own headphones on, listening to our thing and being in our space. And then other times where we're chatting the whole time while we're doing it. And it has nothing to do with our connection. It has to do with wisdom of our own needs.
I love that.
And so just really, again, talking to them later, like, what is it that your body needs right now? Are you listening to that? Like when we try to tell them they're okay when it's not, and like we're dismissing their reality, but their body is sending signals and we want them to listen to those signals. um we don't want to override that and teach them how to regulate it. It really teaches them respect for their body, respect for emotions, and then that respect connects us.
I love that. And people who have listened to my podcast for a little while know, like I've told this story a lot, but I feel like, just because of my experiences growing up, I feel like emotions weren't safe and things like that. And so I had a really, really bad kind of breakdown in order to have the breakthrough when I was about almost 30 years old, right? It was
Yeah.
like I had to experience like the worst of all horrible things so that I could like come to have more compassion for myself. And so this conversation has been wonderful because one of the things I'm like, I don't want my children to have to go through all of that in such a like dramatic, violent way, like I want them to know that their emotions are okay. And so I feel like through this conversation, what I've really learned is more curiosity, more compassion, both for myself and the emotions that I'm feeling and the emotions that they're feeling. And like, I think that's really, I mean, going to someone like you and learning the skill sets and like, troubleshooting and things like that are really, really important. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's really just learning curiosity and compassion for all of the people.
Yeah, if I could sum it up, those are the two words. And that's what I use like daily. I have a graphic and a kind of a lesson around that of helping them to get into that, and some different, phrases and tools that they use to help them in the moment. And there's like an emotion zone that I help them create, an emotion zone, either area in your house where you go to use different physical things to help you to feel the emotion. And it's not a timeout that you're in trouble, that you're acting this way. You go there to feel.
Mm,
Because some people call this a calming corner, but I don't want you to go there to feel like you need to calm down. You're going there to feel because it's safe to feel.
mm,
And when you're done feeling and you're ready to come out, great. And so it's this place, but you also can have an emotion zone wherever you're at. You can literally just drop into your body and let yourself feel, even if people are swarming all around you, even if kids are yelling, even if you're at school, you can do that, but it might take practice to do it in your own little separate place in the house. And so you can set up different things that we gather and written instructions on what do I do when I'm like this crazy, and that those are tools that kind of help the family, and remembering that we validate the emotion, not the behavior.
Yeah.
And you can validate even when they're doing a bad behavior.
Yeah.
And so
I
you're
love,
not validating the behavior in any way. Like, I can see you feel really angry, and it's so hard to feel angry. It totally makes sense that you're angry about this, even if they've just yelled at their sister.
yeah.
And so you separate that and say that behavior is not okay. And don't even talk about the behavior, because in that moment when they're angry, you can't even talk to their prefrontal cortex anyway. And so you're just validating, and that brings them back down and regulating the body until then we can actually communicate about it later.
So then would you suggest that, like, I love that like that's a very tangible thing. Like when they're, when their behaviors are out of whack, then we're just validating the emotions. And then
Always focus on,
later, like when everything's calmed down, we
yeah,
can be like, we can't hit our sister no matter
yeah,
how upset we feel.
yeah, exactly. And so we come back and say that what you said, like, it totally made sense that you were angry here. You just start again with validation. Like, I could see how that was. Are you ready to talk about the behavior of what happened? Remember, it's okay for you to be angry. Like, you're really reinstating that there's nothing wrong with what they felt.
Yeah.
But the thing that is not okay was the behavior, and that isn't anger. See, because we've been taught all our life that when you yelled, you were bad, and so we believe anger is bad. And it takes so much work for me with adults and kids to separate that out and say the anger is beautiful. It's one of my favorite emotions, literally. And like, that's so beautiful that that anger showed you what you valued and what's important to you. That's so wonderful. But then we want to have the pause button and be able to pause and decide what we're doing with that beautiful emotion, and choosing that we have that beautiful ability to always choose what to do. That really helps them feel empowered. And so you're having this empowering conversation with them, even though they've just done a bad thing. And so
Yeah.
then they feel this desire to want to change their behavior instead of shame. I'm stupid. I'm horrible. I felt a bad emotion. My parents hate me.
Yeah.
Because
And I
that's how
think
you
that's
feel when
so
you come.
real. That is
Yeah,
how
because you
kids
come in
think.
and say, you just yelled at your sister. You can't do that again. You see, that's so different than wow, you felt anger. That's so cool. But look what happened when you let it explode instead of you learn to work with it. And you give examples of your own self when you messed up and how you repaired, and say, hey, this is your moment to repair with your sister. This is so cool. And it sounds so funny, but you're like, you had a disconnection with her. And the beauty is when you repair after disconnections, relationships get even better.
I love that.
And they're like, whatever.
You're like whispering sweet nothings in my ear. I love
Yeah.
it.
But I'm like, no, really, this is really cool. And it shows that your willingness to be vulnerable about your big emotion you had will make her respect you even more. You can't make her, but it gives her the opportunity to want to respect you more, because you come to her in this vulnerable humility and apologize and want to reconnect instead of just sorry.
Yeah.
Like the forced telling your kid to say sorry, like it does nothing.
Yeah. No, that is so true. And I realize that, like, what you just said totally backs up, like, why kids are so resistant to, doing the thing. That it's because they feel shameful. They know that they messed up, and they don't really need us to tell them that yelling at their sister or whatever. But I feel like what my kids do is, no, I didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't do that. I
Yeah.
didn't yell at my sister. What are you talking about? I wasn't, and like, if you validate the emotion, and like, it's just a different
Totally different.
environment for them to see, like, oh, you're right. I was, it gives them the opportunity to show that humility. Like, yeah, I was a jerk just then. Like, maybe I could say sorry or whatever, instead
Yeah,
of
it
having
gives
to
them the opportunity
completely
to bring it
defend.
up instead of you come in attacking. So you're just like, wow, let's talk about that emotion
Yeah.
before you even say the behavior was wrong. And I think something that's really helpful is that the behavior is the least effective and the least important thing to focus on, which that is the thing that everybody's focused on. And they bring their kids to me saying, like, they're hitting, they're yelling, they're not doing their homework, they're misbehaving, whatever. Like, that's the least important thing. It's the least effective thing to focus on too.
Yeah. No, you're so right. Oh, this is so important. I'm so grateful people are having this opportunity. I want to just because I want to make sure that everybody knows that there are people like you who are, that can help with this because it's such important information. But if you had the undivided attention of everyone in the entire world for just a few moments, what do you think is the most important thing you could teach them about managing these big emotions?
I think your ability to be compassionately present in your own body during anyone's big emotions is that skill. Compassionately curious and fully just accept and embrace that emotion that's going on and just allow it to flow and know how to regulate your nervous system back down and be able to communicate about it out loud to people who are around you, or to take space if you know that your communication will be volatile.
Yeah, so good. So good. Tell the listeners where they can find you and learn more about managing emotions, communicating about emotions, and all of the wonderful things that we've kind of unearthed, I think, in this conversation.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's so fun to talk about my favorite subject. So jillfreestone.com is simple, my website, and my Instagram, Jill Freestone Coaching, is my handle.
Thank you so much, Jill. This has been really awesome.
Thank you.
To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next.